Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'll call the meeting to order. Approval of the agenda. Is there any add-ons to our agenda here today? See none, I'm going to ask Troy to give the board an update on the BioGRID and so on, what's going on, so on and so forth. Sometime a little bit later, maybe under new business. Okay, Troy? If there's no add-ons, I have a recommendation here that the agenda be approved as presented. Someone to move, put on the floor, please. Moved by Scott, second by Sue. No discussion. All in favor of the motion? Is carried. Moving on, declaration of interest. You can clear any time you see fit during the meeting. Minutes of the previous minutes. Minutes of the previous meetings would be a better way of saying it. That the minutes of the joint board held on September 22nd, 2020 be adopted. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Brian, second by Sue. Okay. Okay. Okay, moved by Scott, second by Sue. Does anyone have any discussion on that in the minutes? See none? All in favor? It's carried. No presentations, no delegations, no correspondence. We're down to staff reports. A recommendation here that the Township of Chatsworth CAO Clerk Report 2020-38 regarding the RFP BioGRID asset peer review be hereby received, and that the joint BioGRID Board recommends to the Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs and Chatsworth the acceptance of the RFP GHD Group in amount of $22,393.35 exclusive of HST, plus the cost from Ontario Clean Water Agency in the amount of $6,800 exclusive of HST. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Brian, second by Sue. Is there somebody who wants to speak to this? Patty?
Yeah, technology. Thank you. This is a follow-up to the RFP that we issued at the direction of the board to look at the decommissioning costs and the impacts of same, looking at the asset value of the BioGRID and the lagoon as well. We issued the RFP and we only received one response back. The initial response actually came in at 38,000, so considerably higher than what we were quite surprised at that amount, but as a standalone it probably made sense at that amount. But in discussion with Cassie and with Aqua, we realized that GHD Group is also doing the work for Georgian Bluffs on the RFP to look at the feasibility study, and that's under the with the cooperation of Aqua. So Aqua suggested that perhaps we have conversation with GHD to see if they would amend their price. So this is really I'm going to call the Georgian Bluffs RFP a Part A, and the joint RFP would be a Part B, sort of an add-on to that, which certainly makes sense. Through those conversations, they reduced their RFP submission to $22,393.35, and I think that certainly makes sense. I think it'll give the board a very wholesome view of what the feasibility of the biodigester, and also, you know, barring that, what decommissioning might look like and the cost. So in order to do that, Aqua is overseeing the Georgian Bluffs contract or RFP with GHD. So they've proposed a price of $6,800. I think that's money well spent. Certainly this CAO, and I know you have a new one coming on board, but just to have somebody with expertise in water and wastewater services that can, you know, help us sort of manage the project and really give us some some good advice, I think it's money well spent. So I was pleased that we were able to get that cost reduced significantly, so.
Thanks, Patty. Comments from the board? Scott?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So Patty, just so I'm clear, the total cost is going to be with HST is going to be in the neighborhood of what, 32 or 33,000?
So it would be the 22 plus the 68.
Can someone give us what the exact cost is going to be? Just, and that's going to be split between the two member municipalities, correct? So each
That's correct.
municipality is going to be looking at about 16,000 or so. I was just doing quick math in my head. So 16,000 for each member municipality. I think that's a fair amount, Mr. Chair. It'll give us, having the two proposals being done by one engineering firm will give us a very wholesome outlook of both the lagoons and the BioGRID, and I think that's what both the board and the two member councils need going forward to make the appropriate decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. From the chair, I will not be supporting this motion. I have no problem with Chatsworth taking on with the RFP that George and Bus have in place. I have no problem with that. It makes perfect sense to try and reduce the cost. I feel that George and Bus put an RFP out for a feasibility study on the whole operation, and it was being paid for all by George and Bluffs. I really feel that I cannot support mothballing the facility, so I can't support this motion to go ahead with it. I am suggesting that if Chatsworth wants to go ahead with a study to find out costs for mothballing and so on and so forth, that it should be their expense, not George and Bus. So I will not be supporting the motion. Any other comments? Scott?
Well, just in response to that, it was agreed upon previously, the terms of reference were agreed upon, by this board to bring forth this report. So that had already been discussed. So to change now, I don't think is the right time. Mothballing is only one small part of what the RFP is all about. There's a lot more to it, and I think as a joint board and two member municipalities, we should be sharing it. We've been sharing everything else.
We didn't share in the feasibility study to have a look at the whole operation. George and Bus took that upon ourselves to, at the full cost at George and Bus. I have no, and will not support mothballing the facility, so I don't know why I'd want to support having a study done for something they don't want to do in the first place. Comments? Scott?
Well, again, Mr. Chair, that is only a small part of the information that the board was looking for. And it was not to necessarily mothball, but just to present the board with that option if it made financial sense in the short term. So,
Okay, I accept your comments, no problem at all. Any other comments? Sue, go ahead.
I guess when I read this, I see a lot of it being aimed at or around mothballing. So I think, like, in the first 3 lines, it's all about mothballing. So I guess I'm a little concerned there too, because I'm not in favor of mothballing it either. I think we need the feasibility study first, and I wonder if that wouldn't be a better one to have going first before we look at this one, just to see what comes back out of that one.
I'm not sure, haven't been privy to end the conversation with Aqua and so on with this RSP they're doing, Madam CEO, George and Bus. So I don't know what the conversations have been with Aqua and GHD, if it impacts, if one is done before the other. I don't know that. So or it has to be all done at the same time?
I don't really think there's an impact. So the whole purpose of, piggybacking this RFP on the feasibility study was because GHD was already hired by Aqua to do parts of the feasibility study. Through that study, they're gathering a lot of the same information, right? And looking at a lot of the same things and getting the background knowledge. So when we got the first RFP results, they were quite a bit higher. And in conversations I had with Indra, he was like, well, if you combine the two and hire GHD and talk to GHD, they can probably put their price down since they're already doing a lot of the work through the feasibility study. At the time when GHD made their submission on the first RFP, they hadn't been hired by Aqua yet for the feasibility study portion. So that's also why the pricing changed.
Okay, and I can see that. It makes sense. Any other comments from the board? Scott, go ahead.
So, the only other specific thing that I'd like to mention, Mr. Chair, is that, in this, it's actually evaluating the entire facility and what the value of the lagoons and the biodigester is. If we as a board want to move forward with potential partners, that is other information that we require. So to have an evaluation of what the value of the entire property segmented into different parts, because I think as a board there is interest in reaching out to other member municipalities, and we've heard interest from other municipalities about being part of it. So if we don't have this information, how would we know how to sell a portion if that was the wish of the two municipalities? So I think, I know people are getting caught up on mothballing, but I mean, it is talking about what the implications of mothballing would be also. It may come back that mothballing is not an option, but we still receive all the other valuable information that I think we need as a board going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. I won't dispute that comment. I will not support the mothballing. If the motion was to take parts of what you're asking and for instance, to evaluate what the cost is and so on, what is the value of the biodigester, yes, I could support that. But the way the motion is read and what's being presented here, I will not support it. Is there any other discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Brian, go ahead.
I don't know, as Scott said, the mothballing is, that's an option, and that's down the road. We want to just look at break it up, look at the cost of each item. And even when it comes back, you have the choice to say, no, I can't accept that, I won't go along with it. But I think we need those breakdowns now, I really do.
Thank you, Brian. It's just as I said before, I don't support mothballing, so I can't see why we would spend money towards a consultant to look at something I don't want, that I would never support. That's just my opinion. Sue, go ahead.
Just a question of staff. Are these two reports that we're looking at, the feasibility and this, complementary to each other? Are they total individual? Help me kind of get a perspective on that, please.
You can do one without the other. I wouldn't say they're completely individual. I'm sorry, I don't really know what you're trying to get at. Like, you can do one study without the other, for sure. So what are you trying to get at?
I guess what I'm really asking is one duplicating parts of what the other one is
No,
doing?
not at all.
They're
No.
totally separate, okay,
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
okay.
Patty, go ahead.
Thank you. No, definitely two separate projects, but they complement one another, and I think it gives you a holistic view of the biodigester. So, I've been here for 4 years now, and we've continually talked about, when I first started, we had the issue with the agreement with SAS Global. And then we looked at some other partners. So, this whole discussion about where we go, I think we need some outside, some third-party advice. It may be that there are other partners out there. The climate is constantly changing with regard to source-separated organics. And, things seem to go so far and then they're put on hold, which, that seems to be a problem with the biodigester since the inception. So, I think to do this as a Part A and a Part B really makes sense. And, whether we use the word decommissioning or mothballing, the idea is that it may sit for a period of time. When I look at the costs that the board has spent because of the issues that we've had in the past year with regard to, being able to provide, I'm not sure what the proper word is, Troy, that we've had to rent equipment to bring in, that's been a huge cost. And so, maybe it makes sense until we look at some other options. Maybe it makes sense to decommission it for a period of time. But I think you want to know what's the impact to your infrastructure. I think this makes absolute sense. And, I think the direction was already given from the board to proceed with the RFP. Let's get the information and look at it as a rather fulsome review at this point. I think the system's been up and running for well over 10 years now, and it's been fraught with problems. And so let's get a fulsome view of what might we be able to do.
Thank you, Patty. Scott, go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, I would be prepared to make a friendly amendment removing the word mothballing. If we look at the RFP, an analysis of the operations or operating options of the facility, including operation strictly of the lagoon. So if we remove mothballing from that first sentence, the overall value of the biodigester and lagoon, and the potential to operate the facility using the lagoons only. We've heard time and time again that the biodigester is not designed to use septics. That's not the waste that the biodigester really wants. The biodigester going forward will be source-separate organics. We know that. So one of the interests, are we better off in the interim until source-separate organics come through, diverting that waste into lagoons? So we need to know, are lagoons capable of taking the waste from both Georgian Bluffs and Chatsworth? So that's part of the information that we would receive here. So I just don't want the board to be hung up on the word mothballing, because I think there's so much more, in this report that we need to get. So the implications of mothballing. I mean, if mothballing is the term that people don't like, I think we can get the information on the wholesome overview without those words being there. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Good comments. I could agree to an amendment motion if it only had overall value of biodigester and lagoon and potential to operate the facility using lagoon only. That's one. And value in state author lagoons, 2. I could agree to that, to have that done. And that's as far as I'll go. Taking out the words and so on to try and change it is not, I don't agree with that. It needs to be a completely different RFP advising GHD. These are the only 2 things you're going to look at. And that should reduce their cost, and so they're not spending any time towards what's going to cost a mothball and something like that. That's the part that, it's not the word, it's just I don't agree with mothballing the facility, so that's why I can't support it. But the way the motion's being presented here before us now, I cannot support it. Sue?
While I disagree with mothballing, I don't disagree with the idea that maybe we need to see what those ramifications are with what does that cost us? Is that the best thing to do for the facility, or is it the worst thing we could do and it would cost us more to bring it back online after the fact? So I do think we need that information. I think that's important to have there.
Comments? Scott?
I just think we owe it to our taxpayers, and to our councils to be able to present them with all the information. Any decision around, decommissioning or short-term closure, if that was in the best interest, would be the decision of council. But I think it's incumbent upon this board to be able to provide our council with that information. And, no one is saying that we are decommissioning or mothballing. But if the report came back saying that you're going to spend thousands of dollars over the next 2 years until a source separate organic contract is in place, and the option of diverting all of it away from the biodigester is a viable option, why wouldn't we want to look at that? So I believe we need that information. Thanks.
Thank you. Cassie, go ahead.
Just another food for thought. If you could wait to award this RFP until the feasibility study is done, because what if the feasibility study says it's not feasible? Then you would need this information, to decide how to proceed. Or if it comes back and says it is feasible and provides recommendations for how to pursue partnerships and how to generate revenue, then you wouldn't need this information. So just another thing to consider.
That I agree with those statements. That makes perfect sense. But Madam Clerk, I need direction here on this. First of all, I'm going to ask for a recorded vote of the motion, but can we make friendly amendments to it, just including the last 2 items of the RFP?
So, I will look to my purchasing policy peeps because the motion doesn't directly speak to mothballing. The motion speaks to the RFP. So if we're looking to amend the RFP, is it too late to do so as we've already circulated it?
If you amend the RFP, you're changing the cost of the work.
Exactly.
So if that's what you want is an amendment to the RFP, then you need to defer this, and Patty needs to talk to GHD again and see what the new price would be.
And that's what I was saying before, that, I have no problem supporting the last 2 items in your RFP, but not the first 2. And I base it on wanting to get that feasibility study that George and Bus are paying for come through first, to get that information before we take the next step, if it's necessary to go to a consultant to look at mothballing and something like that. If that's comes out of the feasibility study, so be it. Then we take that steps at that time. Sue?
When do we expect to have the feasibility study completed? Like, how long would we be talking about deferring this to?
I think spring 2021.
So what's the impact then of just deferring this until we read that study, and then if we feel we need this one, go ahead with it at that time?
There isn't an impact except that you don't have the information as quickly.
Scott, go ahead.
Well, the other impact is the cost have been reduced because they were going to do, instead of having additional visits and site visits, it would all take place at one time. And that's why it makes sense, to gather as much information as we can. And again, I really think we need to get that. Thank you.
Okay, if I see no other discussion on the motion before us, this is what we're going to be voting on, is a motion that's presented. Madam Clerk, I've asked for a recorded vote.
Okay, so when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Mayor Scott Mackey.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Brian Gamble. And Mayor Dwight Burley.
Opposed?
And that carries 3-4, or 3-1, sorry.
Oh, good. Thank you. So by passing this motion, we're going to proceed with this RFP, and George and Bus are going to share half the cost, approximately $17,000. Is that correct? And that's just will be taken out of the report. That's why we know that, because the motion doesn't really say that, does it?
The motion doesn't say that you're going to split the cost. It says the total cost.
That's
But
what I'm
as
saying.
it's a joint board, you will be splitting the costs.
Okay. It's just there's nothing saying anywhere in the minutes that we are going to share the cost. That's all I'm saying. Because before on the RFP, we did say that we were paying for it.
It's inherent in it. So the board is paying for this RFP, and 100% of the costs of the board are split 50-50.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, moving on to our public question period. Madam Clerk, is there anyone?
No, there's not.
None? Okay. Unfinished business, none? Under new business, Troy, I'd ask you to give us an update on what's happening at the facility.
Yeah, so I've been working with a couple of haulers for material. I've also have the engine rebuilt, did a bunch of exhaust repairs, antifreeze lines repairs, generator was cleaned and inspected. I was up and running, but we cleaned the intercooler and tested it. It was fine, but then after a few hours of running, it presented a leak. So I'm currently shut down again at the moment until I can figure out where I can get a replacement intercooler for the engine. As the material side, currently I can potentially get some source separated organic material that has been pre-processed. It's from a facility in Pickering. The only problem is it'd be coming in a tractor trailer, and the site isn't really suited for that tractor trailer to be able to dump into the tank. Currently working on to see if I can get a smaller truck temporarily to try that material. I could get $25 per cubic meter with the tractor trailer, so I'm trying to see what I could get. There is another company by London that's starting to pre-process SSO as well. They're currently not up and running yet, but when they do, that could potentially be another source where we could at least accept some material. I was called about another type of material. This one's a bit different. So in Ontario, they have a different type of cremation for humans. It's called biocremation now, and they were actually wanting to bring material to our site. This one, it can be political and etc. So I'm not sure if the board's interested to go down that road, because we would have to amend our ECA. The BAO would be getting involved. So I kind of wanted to let you guys know about this material. It's just, yeah, with everything going on, I'm not sure if we want to go down that road with that material.
Not a real warm, fuzzy feeling on it, but what's the
No.
board think? Go ahead, Scott.
I have to ask, is there a lot of this material?
You're regulated to 2 cremations a day, and apparently there's 6 in Ontario that do this biocremation now, and yeah, they basically kind of liquefy you and clean up, and then liquid goes one way and the remains go the rest of the way, another way.
Scott?
I think there's a lot more information that we would need. But right off the top of my head, I don't think that's something we need to go down, Mr. Chair.
With the amendment of the ECAs and having the BAO involved, I don't think it would be but I just, so this way you're aware of what materials have been put towards.
Thanks for that. Cassie, go ahead.
Staff at Georgian Bluffs had already made the decision we're not going there, but we don't really have the authority to do so, which is why Troy is telling you today.
Well, we don't want any ghosts.
I'd hope my life wouldn't end up just going through a biodigester, but. Okay, Troy, yeah, go ahead. Anything else?
No, that's kind of been it. The big thing is with that intercooler, I'm just trying to find out where I can get one, how quickly I can get one, and then I can get back up and going again.
So most of these parts come out of the States?
This one, I really hope they have one in Florida. If not, it might be Germany.
Scott?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Troy, any estimate on what the cost of the intercooler would be?
It could be about, I'm guessing it could be about 10,000. I'm currently looking at also getting it rebuilt as well to see if that's an option, but so far I haven't found that yet.
Mr. Chair, we keep spinning our tires here, and it's 10,000, 20,000 for something that's not producing the power. It's the cost that we're incurring, and we're going backwards all the time. So it just is ongoing.
Accept your comments. Cassie?
I was going to say, depending upon the cost we get, we will bring it back to the board for decision making. But per the purchasing policy, under 5,000, the manager has the authority to make the call. So Troy would have the authority to do it. If it's over 5, we could bring it back to the board for a discussion.
Okay. Okay, thanks for that update, Troy. Does the board have any questions of Troy? See none? So let's move on for our agenda. We are now going to go into closed session. I have a recommendation that the Georgian Bluffs Chatsworth Joint Board move into closed session at 11:31 p.m. with the interim CEO, treasurer, Georgian Bluffs CAO, clerk, Chatsworth clerk, Georgian Bluffs operating manager, and Chatsworth to discuss one, advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege, including communication necessary for that purpose. Madam Clerk.
I would just like to note that the utilities coordinator for Georgian Bluffs, being Troy Unruh, will also participate in closed session. So if we could amend the motion to include him, please.
Okay, so you're going to amend the motion for Troy to be there too? Okay. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Scott, second by Sue. All in favor of the motion? It's carried. We are now in closed session. So Thank you, Madam Clerk. We are now in open session. We only went in camera to discuss what we went in to discuss, nothing more. Do we have any other business here today? Seeing none, I need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Scott, second by Sue. There's no discussion. All in favor? We're now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.